I hope you all have been having a great time at the conference. We have an opportunity this afternoon during this breakout to talk a little bit more about ecosystems for young professionals. I know that one of the things we're all aware of is that we have some challenges in Maine as it relates to bringing in young professionals, but most importantly, keeping them. And there are a number of different organizations that have strategies and programs, and they're in deep conversations about how do we do that. So there are partnerships between educators, employers, different members, community organizations, and all of those groups are working together collaboratively to create essentially what we hope is an integrated ecosystem to support young professionals on their career pathways, looking at opportunities for leadership development, and then, of course, successfully living and working in Maine. We need to keep folks here as they roll into our great state, but how do we keep them here? So our participants today will introduce themselves in just a moment. Our speakers will introduce themselves, and we'll be examining the role of public schools in building the pipeline, including efforts to diversify the educator workforce and strengthen long-term talent development. And then what we hope is that you leave with some practical strategies to attract, develop, and retain young professionals. We also want you to do more than just listen. We will have an opportunity for you to ask questions as well. But first, I'm going to have the moderator or the panelists introduce themselves. We have a great crew here for you today. So, John, you are big and present on my screen. Do you want to start?
Oh no. I hope I'm only 1/4 of your screen, Jen, but hi everyone, welcome. It's great that to be here. It's great that you're all here on a rainy Friday afternoon. My name is John Delorme. I work at a nonprofit called Educate Maine. I'm the program manager. I'm mostly working on our educator engagement side. So I help run programs like the Maine State and County Teacher of the Year program,
Mm.
our Teach Maine Center, and a few other various programs all around the educator workforce in Maine. Um, I will dive into this more. I could talk forever, so I'll kick it back to you, Jen.
Thank you, Jonathan. Ashley, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name's Ashley Aslin, and I am the marketing manager at Live and Work in Maine. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Live and Work in Maine, it's pretty much our mission's really in the title. But our goal is attraction and retention of Maine's workforce. So Jan kind of touched on this earlier, but we're an aging state. So essentially, we have to make sure that we have enough working age folks living and again working in Maine. So we do that in many different ways. But we are a small team. So although my title is marketing manager, we all wear many hats. And we focus a lot on partnership and we try and collaborate when we can with being that small team so we can reach as much of the state as possible. And yeah, we're really excited about this conversation and just to see what everyone has to say on the panel.
Thanks, Ashley. And Danielle.
Hello, everyone. My name is Danielle Pierre. I am in Lewiston, Maine. I work for a nonprofit called Great Schools Partnership. And our main goal is to make sure that students are achieving, that they're successful in whatever part of Maine they live in. And I specifically am the team lead for one of our big projects called Diversifying the Educator Workforce. And a lot of our work is in Maine, but also across New England. So I'm excited to be here today. I'm also bringing my former principal hat, my former teacher hat, and then also my mom hat of, two boys that are going to have to go through our educational system someday and thinking about what the workforce is going to look like when they're old enough to be in school. So excited to talk with the rest of this panel and for all those who are listening.
Great. Thank you, Danielle. I also want to point out that we originally had one additional panelist. Rosa, she is in the process of adding one other person potentially to our workforce for the future at this point. So she's a little busy at the moment. And it was really fun to hear that we were talking about this a few moments ago in terms of the children who are represented here by their parents and their place that they're in. So with our panelists, We have people with children from the age of like maybe one day after tomorrow to 3 years old. So they have a little time to get them ready to work in Maine. But thank you for being here and thank you for all the work you're doing. We are going to talk a bit about supporting education, diversity, talent, and training. We have some questions for our panelists. Then we'll go into compensation and career pathways, and then belonging and community engagement, which are 3 areas we think are vital to keeping these young people in Maine. What I'd like to do, though, is we'll hear from them as we go through these questions. And as you have questions, we'll pause at the end of each one of these sections. So perhaps you can weigh in with some of your questions that we may have missed as we created the questions for the session. That sounds good to you all, our panelists. We'll dive in. So as we think about talent and training, all of our folks know a little bit about this, of course, a lot about it. But we'll start with John and Danielle. So how are Maine schools identifying and recruiting diverse educator talent? That's the first question. How do we get that talent?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in first. And I would say that it is a challenge. We have a teacher workforce shortage in Maine. There are a lot of districts that are chronically understaffed, and they are looking for innovative ways on how to get teachers in the building. And it's been a problem probably before the pandemic, but it certainly has been after, where we see that teachers are in classrooms with maybe too many students to what the district would want. We see a lot of emergency certified or conditionally certified teachers, meaning that they have not been deemed certified by the Maine Department of Education to be in the classroom. Doesn't mean that they're not great teachers, or that doesn't mean that they're not working towards a certification, but it means that there wasn't the careful planning and hiring process for teachers. So that's just where we're at. We don't have enough people entering the profession, nor do we have enough people in the profession in Maine right now. So that's just kind of setting the context. And then as for the diversity of teachers, that is something that we have been working on with Great Schools Partnership. So Danielle is going to be able to talk a lot more about that, but it is a challenge. There's been some innovative strategies on how to attract teachers from out of state, which Ashley and Live and Work in Maine has worked on. And one thing I'd really like to stress is the grow your own programs. So there is a trend now. There's a lot of investment in and a lot of backing, and just we're seeing the results of having districts have grow your own programs, meaning that there's diversity already in our communities. There's already talent. There's people that want to be teachers. They just need to be supported. And long gone are the ways of entering the education profession, like how I did, which was going to a 4-year university and then paying tuition to do student teaching. Not getting paid to do student teaching, but like basically even worse than an unpaid internship, an internship that I'm paying for, meaning through tuition, to become a teacher. We're seeing a lot of districts piloting and pivoting to seeing about their ed techs, how they can be paid to learn. So apprenticeship programs and pre-apprenticeship programs and other solutions that districts are piloting. And Educate Maine has been working on it this year into piloting new teacher apprenticeships. And there's a lot of different ways that districts can go about that, but it's something that we really are encouraging. So that's just one little thing.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think, John, you spoke to a few things that I was going to touch on. First, I would like to say live, work in Maine. It's definitely like being seen and being noticed. One of my former teachers saw a sign as she was riding the train that said like live, work in Maine. And she was like, should I come there? I was already sad that you left Boston, but I was thinking that I should come to Maine just because of this sign. Maybe it's a sign. So I definitely think there are some really great efforts that are being noticed, even in different states, like trying to bring people from different states and making that reach a little bit further, just because, like you said, John, there's not necessarily diverse teachers already in Maine. And so having that reach even outside of Maine and really thinking about those grow your own programs to get students interested who may not otherwise be are definitely some strategies. I would say that in my role, as I mentioned, I'm a former school leader, and now in this role at Great Schools Partnership, I get to do a lot of coaching, and we work with different schools to think about, what it is that they should do to attract more diverse educators. And so it doesn't look the same at every school. Some schools are in different places, but one of the reports that we came out with as a part of the Diversifying the Educator Workforce team was a report that shared different strategies that are research based on how to recruit teachers of color. And then also, it shared what other states are doing. So what we do sometimes is we go into these different schools and we coach and we share those different strategies. We look at some of their HR practices and they're like, okay, these are some ways that we need to improve. And then this is going to help us to bring in some more diverse educators of color. So I think there's an element of like training, showing what's happening in other states. And then also we do a lot of communities of practice where we get people together. So we have someone who is a principal, for example, in New Hampshire, and someone who's a principal here in Maine, and having them all together on one call, they're like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here. I'm going to try that in my school, and then vice versa. So a lot of training, as I mentioned, a lot of coaching, but then also this opportunity to get people together and then cross-pollinate. So I think those are some of the things that I'm noticing that are happening.
Thank you, Danielle. Anything that you wanted to add, Ashley, since I live and work in Maine was mentioned on the recruiting side?
I mean, I think just, I don't know exactly where this fits, but something that we had identified, we worked with the Department of Education last year or 2 years ago, in an effort to recruit educators outside of Maine. And something we had noticed is a lot of these smaller schools, they don't actually have the budgets to, when they have an opening for a job, they don't necessarily have the budget in order to advertise that job appropriately. So what we did during that year is, or it might have been 2 years, we had on our job board allowed all of the schools in Maine to post on our job board, and we tried to promote that as much as possible in order, and then we took funds from that Department of Education campaign in order to promote our job board so we could help give everyone in some of like rural parts of Maine an opportunity for some of their openings to be seen, because we noticed a lot of these schools, their way of getting a job opening out was like posting on their Facebook, and it's really only in that small bubble that people are seeing those jobs. So that's a challenge we see here with job openings in rural parts of the state.
Thank you, Ashley. So it's kind of all hands on deck and different strategies to bring people in. And one of the other questions is we can bring in as many people as we want as we think about diverse talent, but how do we keep them? And Danielle, you mentioned a little bit about this in terms of some of the educators coming together, but what do you see happening in terms of retaining these important educators?
Absolutely. I think support is like the overarching umbrella, but what does support look like? So, support does look like bringing those educators together, especially in affinity spaces where educators can be connected with people that look like them, that have the same roles that they have, and have opportunities to come together. So, I know that there are some affinity groups that already exist in Maine, and I've been privileged to be a part of them a few times. Also, as someone who was leading a focus group and seeing what is happening that is currently going well and what is not going well, because I think it was Educate Maine who was leading a lot of those focus groups as they prepared for the Teach Center to be built and put together in the programming. They wanted to know what teachers needed, and something that they were noticing is that teachers of color, their opinion was missing, and that they weren't necessarily showing up to the focus group. So Aisha Hall and I led that focus group, and we also had some community members right in Lewiston be able to help lead that group as well and get, thoughts from educators of color in a space that they were comfortable in. So definitely support in the form of affinity spaces, definitely support in the form also of mentoring. I think it's really important. Ashley and I were just talking, I'm a mom that has kids that are slightly older. She's like, how is it on the other side? Well, having someone to be able to mentor who's kind of already been through it is important. And so finding mentors for teachers of color, making sure you're training them, making sure you're leaving space for, for them to be able to pour into teachers, newer teachers especially. I think that is support that's important. And then also professional development. We kind of get into this space where we just kind of like throw people in the classroom and then be like, good luck. Well, there's lots of professional development, even in terms of, classroom management, in terms of writing lessons. And this is definitely for teachers of color, but also for really anyone who is new in the classroom. So again, I just want to stress support in the form of professional development, mentoring, and affinity spaces are some strategies that I'm definitely noticing are working well when
Great.
done properly.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Danielle. Jonathan, I think you're ready to add to that.
Oh, I just want to add on to that. Yeah, I mean, support is absolutely the overall stressor there. And I think a key component of that is having a mentor, or at least having a designated mentor in your district or in your school. That has been a challenge in Maine. There's something that we're working on with the state to increase the amount of money a mentor is given. Every district kind of sets their own price, but just honoring the time that it takes to be a mentor and having qualified mentors and kind of defining what that is. Something that we've have worked on at the Teach Maine Center is having a definition of what it means to be a qualified mentor. And then you have like your ascribed mentor, which can be really helpful for support. And you have great outside organizations like Great Schools Partnership that can be coaches. But then it's just to stress that finding your professional network. So there are many different professional networks and organizations in Maine that can help not just educators, but like any professional. But in education, there is. So what Daniel was referencing was the county forums. So we did 18 different forums, one in each county, and then a couple virtual, and one in Lewiston that was for teachers of color. And we worked with the third place, and the third place does have different sectors for different networking opportunities. And if many people on this call may be familiar with the third place or Adila Mohammed, but they've done a great job of connecting people of color throughout Maine. And just a few other organizations that we've worked with closely. So we have this awesome program, Daniel, MIEF. What is
Maine Impact Educators of Color.
Thank you. We've been working with Great Schools Partnership on that. Kind of a protracted year-long cohort where individuals are learning and learning from each other and working on a project on how they want to grow, strengthen, and diversify the educator workforce in Maine. And just a few weeks ago, we've worked with Outmaine and Equality Maine to host queer educator network events. So we've done these in various parts of Maine. There are different affinity and identity groups out there in Maine. So we have the queer educator networking events, but then also getting connected with your content area or other things. There's guaranteed in Maine, there's going to be a content area specific association that is relevant to that teacher. And that level of professional support is huge because you realize you're not the only one. There's one for world languages. There's one for specifically each language. There's one for history and math. However you define it, there's going to be a professional association out there in Maine. And I really encourage any teacher to go there. I encourage any mentor to encourage their teacher to seek that out. And I encourage every school and district to help their teachers get professional development outside of their district and get connected throughout Maine because it's really valuable.
I have a question actually. I don't know if Jen, if you don't mind me asking, it's just out of curiosity, and I don't know if either of you guys have the answer to this, but when we're talking, is there like specific training that educators receive on how to handle some of these more like complex issues when it comes to diversity where in that like that range could be quite large, but I'm just thinking of like some of these problems that are happening. How are they equipped on dealing with those? Do you guys have any thoughts on that? I know we're talking about diverse educators, but obviously we have diverse students. And I think that's one of the big reasons we want to make sure we have diverse educators for them to look to. I just didn't know if you guys had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, we Great Schools Partnership. I feel like we're kind of getting into that next question too about our partnerships. But one of the districts that we've worked in, I'm gonna be like mindful not to like name districts, just to keep privacy. Definitely had some challenges where students felt like when they would share that something happened, maybe there was a comment that attacked their identity. They would say that teachers perhaps would hear these things and they would ignore it, and they felt like it was hurting their school culture. And then the teachers replied, this is what the school leader told me, that they didn't feel like they were equipped or knew how to reply. So I was able to work with the school to have a day where they taught basically teachers how to respond. And, the first thing was like not to ignore it. And then the next thing is to, make sure that you're like addressing the thing, talking about why it's wrong and how it hurts our school culture and the history behind it and those type of things. So I have been able to do some trainings like that, for example, where it is not only training the school leader, but it's training the teachers and then also training students, but also giving them a space for like advocacy to share, what's going on and what's happening. So I can't say that that's something that's happening across every school, but there are definitely schools who are looking for that type of support. And our organization is definitely providing that. And it looks different. Like some schools, like I said, they need ways to respond to microaggressions. Some schools, it's like, hey, here are some things that are happening between the staff, and what does it look like to address those things? So there definitely is some things that are going on, but some schools aren't even like noticing that that's a thing at all, and like they don't see it as a problem. So I think the need varies from school to school.
No, thank you. I just, as we're talking about like recruiting, it's nice for us to know that or not just us, but us as a whole, that these resources exist because I feel like we don't, when we might have a question of someone asking, like, I'm going to come here, but what's going to happen? Like, am I going to have these resources to turn to with some of these like complex questions that,
Absolutely.
as we all
Yeah.
know, Maine is a white state and we like aren't a lot of these how would I say this? Like these problems are coming up sometimes for people for the first time and they want to make sure they're handling it delicately and with respect that I'm like, I would love to turn people to programs like yours. So thanks for sharing. That's really cool.
There's been a lot of great work on restorative practices in schools, and some schools are so far ahead in terms of how they have restorative practices. But I think in terms of like a recruitment and retention tool to get more diverse educators, like if you don't have a restorative practice team, or if you're looking to get into that, I think that having that at a school and a system is a retention and attraction tool to get teachers to join your districts or your school.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because, oh, sorry, go ahead, Jan.
I was just going to say we have a comment in the chat and saying, yeah, I'm glad you brought this up, Ashley. But one of the question marks is, I would love to bring some of the resources to my school. And of course, how do you do that, right? How do you do that? How do you bring those resources to the school to help the educators address some of the issues?
Absolutely. I mean, well, I think there are two ways. One thing I'd like to mention is what John talked about earlier with the Maine Impact Educators of Color. One of the great things that we really appreciate about that group is that people are all coming together from their different schools. So they're coming from rural areas, they're coming from, busy Portland, and they're all coming together. They're naming some of these things that are potentially struggles. They're getting resources from Great Schools Partnership, and then they're taking it back. So they're taking back some physical resources that we're sharing, but they're also taking back the stories, the partnerships, the, hey, can I call you later because we're dealing with some of the same type of things. They're taking that back with them to their schools. And same thing with those community communities of practice that I mentioned. So these are all resources that we are definitely providing and would be happy, to follow up. There are lots of free things on our website too, so feel free to check out our website. But I think that's a part of even my partnership with Educate Maine right now. And John, like, John knows way more people at different schools, and that's why we're connecting and getting together so that our organizations can connect and make sure that we are giving resources and allowing people to be able to share. Yeah, so those are my thoughts.
Thank you. The next question is around partnerships, but partnerships have been a thread throughout every answer to the questions we've had thus far. So you've illustrated what currently exists to some degree. I'm sure there's more out there. How effective are they? Are they working?
I mean, so to speak towards the Maine Impact Educators of Color, it's our first year of the cohort, so I'll let you know. So far from what we've seen from the feedback that people have been providing, they really appreciate it. And the number one thing that they're taking away is what their colleagues are sharing with them. So there's nothing like having strong partnerships with colleagues. So I would say that they're working well, and just in terms of could it be stronger? I think it could be stronger. I think it could be more effective. And sometimes the biggest challenge is time. It's like, who has time to like come together? And sometimes people get caught up in oh, I have to check this box off or I have to check that off. But if we really intentionally put the time and the space in to be able to create space to connect with other schools, other districts, I think that would make it more effective. I don't know if other people have thoughts on that as well.
Thank you, Danielle. Jonathan or Ashley, anything else about partnerships and how to make them more effective?
Yeah, I could talk forever on this. I mean, I think in Maine, that's the key. We are a pretty geographically larger state, but a smaller state, and I think it's just about the you know this whole conversation is about how connections can help the career pathway, how can leadership development and everything. In Maine, we do have a lot of the ability to connect, and I think that that's key. One thing that is underutilized, I think, are employers in the area. There is and seems to be a growing movement for schools to reach out to employers for various things. The extended learning opportunities or ELOs are just such a vibrant space in Maine right now. There's so many amazing ELO teachers from even elementary, middle, but especially at the high school level who are bringing in employers or having their students go out to employers. And that is a great way to also bring in diversity as well. From students, but also the community coming in and out. And businesses want to connect with schools, but they often don't know how. And I see that also schools want to connect with businesses, but also don't know how, i.e., also they're both just really busy. And I think that's where also Educate Maine, Great Schools Partnership, Live and Work in Maine can really help. There are a few, or many programs out there that do that. But having a strong partnership with your local employers, and nonprofits, community organizations is really key, I think. Obviously, we're talking about teacher attraction and retention, which that can help with that. But also, I think you have external, how can we get teachers from out of Maine here who maybe are more diverse? But I do see that we already have diversity in our local communities, especially with the younger generation. So how can we grow your own? Like how can we get people to fall in love with being a teacher? And there are some really amazing programs on that. We're probably going to touch later on in this webinar, but I could go on.
Well, it's really part of the next question. How are educators trained to mentor young professionals or students into those pathways?
That's a tricky one. Danielle, I think Danielle's probably the best one to answer this, but I will say that in Maine, it's an area that we are trying to get better at, having a more formalized mentorship program. The higher ed institutions do an amazing job at providing, support for pre-service educators. Student teaching is very robust, but like I said, for some of those people that are coming outside, or just a first year, year teacher, it's so difficult, and the teachers that are doing it, i.e. mentoring, are also really busy. So it's difficult to have the financial support, the time it takes to find adequate mentors. And that's where outside organizations can really help a school, a teacher. So Danielle can talk even more about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have two things that I would speak to. One is just, as John mentioned earlier, the grow your own programs. I'm thinking about the one that exists in Westbrook right now. I can't remember. I think it's called Future Teachers Academy. And so I think that's an example where students get to have an experience before they get to the college level or before they get to the level where they have to make a decision to be a teacher. They get that hands-on experience in classrooms. They get the hands-on experience with preparing to get, I think they have a partnership with USM, and they get to get credit for classes. And so I think they get to like work under teachers. So I think that that's an example of how they are having an opportunity to just get trained. When I think about, so I'm thinking about students, but those are, I think, like juniors and seniors. But when I think about students too, I see it in different ways. When I'm thinking about how they try to have groups with the restorative practices, and often when we're trying to support students, it's usually a group of like teachers, but we've been training to have students be a part of that group and students to really take the lead of some of those restorative groups and just make sure that they're supporting their peers. And so I would say that's another way that we're supporting students into leadership pathways because we don't just want adults doing all the work and doing things to students all the time. We want them to be engaged and we want them to be able to take the leadership. So those are two things that come to my mind, the Grow Your Own program as an example in Westbrook, and then also some of the work that we're doing to incorporate students in the restorative practices at different schools across Maine.
Yeah, thank you. Those are great examples. And um, as we think about the fact that we are trying to create a path, basically a pipeline, so our young professionals, young people can become professionals in this world of education. But we have some challenges as we think about that. How do we, once we get them going down that pathway, can we keep them there? And one of the issues as we think about that is compensation and career pathways. What exists out there for people to basically make a lifetime commitment in some cases for teachers? I know teachers, teachers who have decided at some point in their life they can't do it anymore because there may be a compensation gap in between what they get paid in their district and what they need to make for their families. So the question is, are Maine employers offering competitive wages, benefits, and career advancement compared to similar regions?
Well, I can speak to this on the Maine employer, not necessarily in just education, but for Maine employers, I will say the conversations that happen in the state may differ, but actually recently, Portland, Maine specifically, I will say was just named the number 10 for big cities or small cities with like big career. What was the actual wording of this? It said big small cities with big career opportunities, and Portland, Maine was ranked number 10. And with the reason I bring this up is because it did state in this, the New York Times is the one who reported this, that there was a 40% wage increase from 2019 to 2024. So I thought that was an interesting stat. And I know that's Portland specific, but Maine has increased our wages. With that being said, we are still not with that. Our cost of living has also gone up, as we all know. So it is challenging. So it's really hard for us to stay competitive. But what we, it's hard. What we end up saying to these employers, because we are still on, it's hard to compete with, the Amazons and the other folks here. But what we do in this case is we try and have employers promote the things that Maine does offer, like the student loan repayment program. And that's a $2,500 tax credit towards your student loans. And we'll tell them promote this almost as if when you're talking about recruiting from out of state, it's not something your employer offers, but it's a nice benefit Maine offers that if you come to move to Maine, you can take advantage of this tax credit. So it helps when they're having these onboarding packages to talk about that, to talk about the next gen, which is that $500 towards that 529 plan where you have a baby in Maine. Highlight some of those initiatives that Maine is offering in order to try and stay competitive. And we really utilize the how do I say this? Maine as a whole for a recruiting tactic. We really try and push that way of life because it is tough for these smaller companies here in Maine to stay competitive. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Danielle and John, but it's always something we struggle with.
Yeah, I was just going to say, oh, Jan, I think
I
you're,
just be and beyond the world of education, right? So as
yeah.
we think about this, how do we keep people?
Yeah, I was just, thinking about my own experience coming here from Boston in 2021, um, as a school leader. All the things that you're referencing, I didn't know about when I was coming here. So again, that makes me wonder about like the promotion, the marketing, and the communication, because my immediate thought, like, yeah, the cost of living may be less here in Maine than perhaps Boston, but I still felt like the wages were not something that I felt like was going to be something that I could live off of with my family. So that is why I explored other roles like this one, where I thought that I could have a salary that was less than what I was making in Boston, but something that I think that my family could live off of. So anyway, that's just more of a question
No,
reflecting on my experience as a woman of color, my experience as a transplant not too long ago, understanding that COVID made things very crazy and just a lot of the prices for things shot up. And again, I'm here in Lewiston. I'm not even in Portland, Maine, or some of the other southern states that are more expensive. And it just made me think about what I thought about the salaries and how that impacted some of my decisions. So I think we still have some more work to do.
I agree. But yeah, that's a big piece that we're trying to do is equip employers with the feedback we get from people is like, hey, we can only do so much getting them here. How can we like bridge that gap for people? But in the meantime, how can we equip you with at least letting them know about some of the resources that are available to them to help bridge that gap a bit. So it is helpful feedback.
I have some fun data on this, Jan, that
Go
I've
for it.
heard. So I just want to say we transitioned to just talking about at-large employers. One big employer is the state of Maine and also districts. So I just want to kind of caveat that like teacher pay, which is set by, districts and has a big funding model that is being looked at currently in this legislative session, and then we're trying to advocate for them to approve the budget, which at the moment currently has some legislation that will raise teacher pay. So that is being worked on. But the caveat is that teacher pay is very low, and that is varied by district, and that's a hurdle. So that's just a challenge. But like at large, right, employers, I agree that our wages are low, but I also think that there's a perception and a narrative in Maine that we can lean into. So we work with Live and Work in Maine on a program called the Maine Career Catalyst Summer Internship Experience, and we're going on year 10, maybe? I don't even know. Actually, I should 9 or 10. So 9 or 10 years of working with employers who have some sort of exploratory learning work-based program. So usually internship, 90% of them are interns. Sometimes they're apprentices or management trainees or whatever. But let's just gloss a big term, interns, right? And we always do a pre and post survey in those interns. Last year, 2025, we had 520 interns part of the program in this state, representing 126 unique employers. So like that's a lot of young people. 92% of those 520 interns were between 18 and 24 years old. So like this is prime time. We need these people to stay in Maine, right? Or we want them to. The post-summer survey that came out had them rank what made them want to have live and work in Maine. Number one, probably not surprisingly, was the outdoor nature and recreation. So how can your business attract and retain people by just having we're connected to the outdoors, right? Number two is Maine's community and culture, which I think is really interesting. Rather subjective, but basically the way of life, right? Maine's community, you get to know your people, right? Number three is personal connection to Maine. This was actually the most number ones, but third overall because we had it one, two, three, right? So personal connection. Number four was professional connection in Maine. Number five was job opportunities in my field. And number six was a particular Maine employer. What I find interesting about that is that all of the things that we think about work were third, fourth, fifth, right? Like the most important thing was like Maine as a geographical state and their personal connection to the community and other people, like individuals. And I think that that's tricky. Like, how does an employer or a district or anything like reach out to that? But also really valuable information that these young people are really craving like a way of life. And I think Live and Work in Maine does a really good job at crafting that and marketing that for people. And as an employer, you can include that right into your job descriptions and your materials that like you come join us in Maine, I think is a really strong
Yeah.
point.
I just want to I know we're starting to, dwindle down on some of these, but I want to touch on that of like we're never gonna be New York City. Like we should own who we are and what we are good at. You can have a great career. And I think that point of like that New York Times article just saying that like you can have a big career here. There is a career to be had here. It does not mean it's going to get you the biggest paycheck. You could probably go make more money somewhere else. But to Jonathan's point of like the lifestyle you have here is really why you come, and there are there are certainly careers that would bring someone here, but let's play up what we have going for us. And that's really what we've been pushing for the last few years as we've started to I love that you have that data because that's what we've started to find, but I love that it's young people are seeing that too. I say this a lot of times too with the young people is when we were younger, I feel like it was like who can have the most impressive internship for the summer and you come back to college and you're like, oh, I worked for this fancy organization. Now I always joke that it seems like it's like who had the most unique summer. Like, well, I was digging clams for the summer or just like something so far out there because kids love to be different and unique and have an experience, which I think is what Maine's all about. So just to put a bow on that is I do think, yeah, we have work to be done and wage wise to bridge that gap. But in the meantime, play up what we have going for us and talk about the incentives, talk about the community, have resources, like have support part with your employer and you don't have something, maybe it's a great internship program, partner with Maine Career Catalyst. If there's someone who is underrepresented in, oh my God, I'm not saying that right, but you get what I'm saying, in your organization, help them find community mentorship to make them build roots here. That's really what we preach. So I think that's my 2 cents on partnership, community, wages.
Yeah. Thank you. And you all have everything we've talked about since we started this session is feeding right into the third area of conversation. We're not going to go there yet, belonging and community engagement. I'm curious, a couple of other questions here. How can organizations make advancement opportunities visible and achievable so everyone knows what's out there and what they can be shooting for?
I think we talked about mentorship also being helpful in this. I was just meeting with some of Jonathan's team about an internship event that they're doing where they're trying to bring or I shouldn't say professionals to network with some of the interns, and they want to have a very casual conversation, not so high stakes networking, and showing some of these students like, here's the trajectory of how your career could go. And I think just being open to talking about how you got to where you are, what steps it might take. I know it's not necessarily organizations, but I guess cross promoting within your company, like making sure the folks that are sitting a little higher are having those conversations with some of the younger interns, and mentoring them that way to show like, hey, you can have a thriving career if you stay in this company. Those are kind of my thoughts.
I had a couple of thoughts. One, wearing the hat of someone, again, who is a transplant. Like, I think websites are super important. Like having stuff visible there and being able to look and be like, hey, these are the different roles. I think internally, it's important, again, as Ashley said, to have mentors, kind of like passing down the information. But I also think like once or twice a year, it's like something that should be addressed, and it should be like, uh, physical. Like even if there's like a graphic, like, because I'm someone who like, downloads information that way, that like at the beginning of the year, hey everyone, you're gonna do great in the school year, awesome, or whatever, the role is. But also mentioning like positions and career advancement opportunities, all those things, could be something that's mentioned. I think another way to bake it in, I think all jobs hopefully have some form of like time where your direct the person that you're directly reporting to sits down and like talks about how amazing you are and doing at your job. And hopefully that could also be a time to talk about like, hey, like where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? How are you liking it here? And then like working through all of the different positions that may exist. So I think that those are some important ways to make it visible. It shouldn't just be, waiting for the person to ask a question or to get the information. I think it needs to be physical. It should be on the website somehow, whether that's internal, external, depending on who the audience is. And it also should be baked into practices that are already happening at your organization.
And if I can just kind of come in real fast with, the financial incentives. So for if you're in the audience and you're a teacher or a district, right? Like there are certain limits, a lot of unions will set and districts will have like a set bands of how many years to teach. But there's so many other opportunities for teachers to access leadership opportunities and get stipends. Obviously you can be a mentor. There's other parts and leadership opportunities in districts, and schools can create those to retain their talent as well. But for employers that like aren't school districts, I do encourage them to look into apprenticeship programs. So some people use apprenticeship programs as like an entry level. So like I need, this kind of like entry level employee, and I'm going to have a 1 or 2 year kind of program. But what's really interesting to explore from employers in the room are apprenticeship programs that are for the mid level or even to kind of high level positions in their organization. There is one manufacturer in Auburn that doesn't have, they have 3 apprenticeship programs, but they're all for like people that have worked there for at least a year, right? And then they're kind of invited in. And his apprenticeship program is great because all of the financial bumps that are required by the program are laid out. The training program is laid out. All of the technical instruction that you need is laid out, and you can get paid to go to college or to learn a skill. So I just recommend employers looking into the apprenticeship program model for that as well. It doesn't have to be just entry level.
Sorry, I'm going to throw one more thing out here, and I'll just throw it out and then I will leave it. But when we're talking about career growth, something that I always sort of consider is it may not necessarily, so let's say someone's a working parent, or maybe their career growth is more days remotely at home. Maybe it's like you have a little more trust, you have more freedom. It may not cost the company more money, but it's like, hey, you've unlocked this this new I don't know if rapport, but like relationship with your employer, where you have that trust to have more flexibility, to have different things like that. I think that's something that when we are talking about like shortage of we have these openings that we can't fill, getting creative with how we're hiring people for specific roles, whether it's like there should be something called like working mom hours. I think credit unions and banks it was big for. But getting creative with some stuff like that, it doesn't necessarily need to be like a big pay increase or a new title. It could be different things like that. So I'll just throw that out there and we don't have to keep harping on it, but I do forget we do encourage employers to look with that creative lens.
Yeah, and in my own experience, having been an HR director for years in different places, it's like being really, really clear about what are the pathways, how do you move through those pathways, timelines. I know there's a lot of impatience about getting from one role to the next role and making more money or having more responsibility, but really setting expectations in a way where people aren't disappointed quickly about, well, I don't have that great job I want right now. No, you don't. And here's the things that would help you to get there. So being more of that mentor. Anything else on mentorship or peer networks before we move on to the next topic area? Again, we encourage those of you who are listening to ask questions and or give us your opinions if you have some insight into some best practices that you would like to share as well. The next area we're going to talk about, and we've touched on it a number of times this afternoon already, is belonging and community engagement. And so the first question is, how do employers and community organizations create a sense of belonging for young professionals? You've touched on it. What else would you say?
Yeah, this is a tough one. And I don't know if I'm the most qualified to speak, but people need to be seen. They need to be seen as for their authentic selves. So an employer, a school district, individuals, they need to ask themselves how they're showing up for their employees and how they are allowing that person to be themselves in the workplace, not fully in the sense that they can just have no restraints, but that they can be comfortable and it's an inclusive workplace environment. So belonging, I think, can really help through, how are you investing in that person? When you hire this person, you know, how are you showing them that they're going to be invested in from professional development to career pathways and opportunities? People, especially young people, they want to travel, they want to have experiences. Can they do a job shadow? Can they go on can they attend a national conference? Can they join a professional network? They get linked in with some programs that maybe Educate Maine runs that are around leadership development, such as our Education Leaders Experience or MDF's leadership cohort that's really amazing and been running for many decades now in Maine. But saying, we want you to come here and we're going to put you through XYZ program. We're going to build you up. I think that really helps with belonging from a professional standpoint, but there's also a whole kind of cultural standpoint as well.
And those kind of programs help to create a peer network, right? As well. Not only is there learning within the program, but you now have a new set of peers to reach out to, talk about your issues and concerns, and learn from. Danielle or Ashley, what would you add to this one?
Yeah. Again, I think this is a challenging question to answer just because of how it's posed, of how are employers and community organizations doing this? Because I don't feel like I have a strong sense of what everybody is doing. All I can say is that it is important that you are creating and fostering a sense of belonging and community. I mean, I think the first way to do that is to I always say do some sort of pulse check. Whenever we're doing work, we do a pulse check like, hey, are you doing these things? What things are you doing? What things are going well? Are you getting a sense of how the different communities that show up at your, your um, organization, workplace, how are the people that are there feeling the different identities that are represented. So first, you have to do that poll check, and then you have to think about to do the work to, offer to foster, excuse me, that sense of trust and that sense of belonging, like making sure that people feel like their voices are welcome. How are you including that? And that's at the base level, that's at the leadership level, is, what we're seeing at the leadership level, reflective of the different identities that we're seeing. How do you take feedback? How do you talk about like decisions? There's all kinds of things that I think are important to foster a sense of belonging. And then if we're talking about young professionals specifically, like a lot of times when you come in places, it's like, you got to start at the bottom, be quiet, climb the ladder and wait till it's your turn. What are you doing to make sure that you are encouraging their voices in a way that makes them feel like it's important? So again, I think it's a challenging question because quite frankly, I don't know everything of what people are doing, but some of the stuff that I mentioned, if that is happening, that's usually a great start. If there's professional development around it, if you are recognizing the same thing as a teacher, you're never a master teacher where you know everything. A teacher is always continuing to learn. And so we should always be continuing to learn. But again, the things that I'm seeing in the districts and the communities that we're working with, the things that are going well are the other communities that are doing those things. So that's my 2 cents.
All I want to say is petition to bring back happy hour.
Yeah.
I think that's really what we're missing here is COVID really killed happy hour, and that's where we've gone.
Yeah, honestly, that's a great point. I mean, just the belonging comes from creating an environment where people can get to know each other better. And I think that the third place, not the organization in Maine,
yes,
third place, but definitely them, but also other third places. And then as an employer, like how are you encouraging people to attend that, and encouraging people to go to there's so many things in Maine, all around the state, not just in Portland. Live and Work in Maine has a lot of those,
Yes, but and for the employers that can, I know we're pretty much out of time here, but for the employers that can, yes to the out of work things, but we're having a hard time getting people to do outside of work hours more. We're struggling with that a lot. So when you can bring people together just for, a half hour in-person meeting and making it a little light, like when you can do that, give a few minutes for everyone to chat. I feel like that does help, and it encourages those. Actually, I had an internship once where they had us mentor up for our lunch breaks or whatever. They had us like, hey, we'll pay for you to go to lunch with someone so you could get to know people. And that really helped with that retention piece because you have a work friend, and it gives an excuse for you to break that like fourth wall of, friendship. Because that's what our bread and butter is with Live Work Maine, is friendship and community is what keeps you here and builds roots. So I know, again, we're out of time, but I'll try and rattle off like checking out us for welcome home events when we have them. When we talk about those are great networking events, places to meet friends. Third place, young professional groups. You can check out Maine Department of Maine Development Foundation. They are the umbrella for a lot of the young professional groups there. And trying to encourage your young folks to sign up for those.
Yeah. Thanks for mentioning that one. The Realize Maine network that I know you Live and Work in Maine is part of is statewide. There are community, and it's growing, and it's particularly designed for those young professionals to keep them in Maine because this is an old problem. It's not a new problem. So that network started I think it was around 2008 or so. Yellow Light Green would have to tell us that because I think he was involved with the very beginning of it. But
Jan, you can tell us a lot about it, I think.
Yeah. And so it was about, not just connecting through work, but connecting to other people who are your age, who are interested in the same kinds of things you are, and building that connectivity and building the belonging that we're talking about here today to keep people. And also attest to your survey, Jonathan, in terms of what people are looking for.
Yeah. And I just wanted to I think we're supposed to go until 2:30.
We are.
Oh my goodness. Sorry, guys.
Don't need to
it
rush.
was 2 this whole time. I'm like rattling off things.
I know, but no, it's good. But but I wanted to go back to so creating a sense of belonging, right? And retaining people. So apprenticeship programs, there's an often quoted stat like 97% of apprentices are retained after they're done being apprentices. So in interns, right, we're noticing in the main career catalyst internship program, employers that connect with us, which is totally free, and their interns go to some of these events that are being put on by Educate Maine and with all of our community partners. We're calling it stickiness. So like basically these interns are more likely to stay within the network of employers that are part of it. They, you know, they may work at Maine Health, but Maine Health only has X amount of opportunities open. But if they don't work at Maine Health, maybe they're going to work at another similar organization in Maine. And we're seeing that, encouraging, well, having programs like an internship or connecting with pre-apprenticeships and apprenticeships are creating a sense of belongings as well. They're sticking around, they're staying. And I think it's because they're seeing that you're investing in their growth and you're giving them an opportunity. So apprentices, they are being paid for their college credits if that's required. Or in an internship, maybe there's gonna be some sort of, you know, credit or housing allowance or stipend or something, right? And also you're giving this young professional a chance. And if it's a high quality apprenticeship or internship program, they're sticking around because they feel like you care about them. And that's just really huge. So if you're not using those programs, I really encourage you to.
Thank you, Jonathan.
I see what
There's a,
yeah, go ahead, Jan.
sorry, I'm sorry, Ashley. I thought you were talking about just getting through the second set of questions. So I would have mentioned that we
Oh,
have
you're
till
good.
30.
No, so no, yeah, I did not. I missed that.
Yeah, there's another question here. Maybe we've answered it to some degree. How can young professionals get involved in community projects to strengthen ties and retention? So not just the happy hour, Ashley, but what are the other kind of meaningful types of activities that we could involve young people in that really connect them to each other as well as other members of the community? Have you seen that?
I will say we've seen a little bit of it's almost like a culture we have to rebuild of, and I think COVID did a number on this when we talk about outside of work hours, this being a little bit of a struggle with volunteering and just getting involved in some of those outside of work hours projects. So a few ways we've seen people do them is um some companies offer like volunteer hours, and if you volunteer it can go towards maybe like vacation time, or it can go towards like I don't know money or different incentives. So it's almost like to rebuild that culture we have to invest in it, and or we have like these, it'll be like half volunteer and but half fun. So maybe it's like a pickleball tournament that raises money for charity or whatever. There's certain things like that that we have to almost start to rebuild. The culture of like investing in your community has really taken a hit, honestly. And I think it's hard for us. We talk about like, oh, we need more funding and we need more money to build these communities up, but we also need a lot of just, we need hands on deck. We need like time volunteering, and money can only get us so far. So I think helping, and I guess I should say like, that's where we have employers kind of put their money where their mouth is. And I don't mean that so bluntly, but it's one thing to just like tell people to go do it, but how can we really, encourage them in our own way?
Yeah. And some of those organizations that you mentioned allow time off for people that they don't have to worry about taking vacation. They can go and volunteer.
Yeah. And I mean, as Jonathan, I think we've all kind of mentioned, time off for young people is huge. They want to travel, they want that free time, they want to go live their lives. So to have a way to maybe earn an extra vacation time, or maybe it's like I had a job once where part of my job was to go fill backpacks for the local school pantry or food pantry at the school, and they would send me and I would go do that And it was a great way for me. I'd go like once a week or maybe once a month, something like that. And I was able to like volunteer, get involved in the community. And I mean, all it really took for them was they lost someone for an hour and a half of their staff time, but it was huge for the food pantry to have a volunteer for an hour and a half. So just some little ideas that they help kind of build that culture back.
Thank you, Ashley. Other ideas? I know there are a lot of nonprofits out there looking for board members, so that's one thing. What else?
I think it depends on the type of employee you have and what the people's work schedules are like. But in this kind of post-COVID hybrid work environment, it is hard to foster a sense of community. I see Cindy's comment, which I think is really great. Um, so I would say, how can you explore, during work hours, times to get together? But I think of all of the different organizations that take part in various, like Ashley said, community events. So, you have the Maine Marathon, and an employer will sponsor that, or other programs that are going on, where they can send their employees there. I would also encourage people to tap into their local chamber of commerces. So they put on a lot of opportunities. So if you're a member of your chamber, there's often always a young persons association. So there's, Uplift LA is the Lewiston Auburn one, and then up in the county, I can't remember what it's called. There's Propel in Portland. So you can encourage your members to get
Momentum.
involved. What?
That's what the county
Momentum?
moment. It took, yes,
Momentum. Yeah, there's
took me a minute too, and
synergy.
almost.
There's a bunch. But and they are all connected too. So if you don't know, I would just continue to look into your network. Like, up in Lewiston Auburn area, we have the Lewiston Auburn Metro Chamber, and then we have the workforce development part of that is called Strengthen LA. So if they're not involved, if they can't go after hours, like we meet once a month in the middle of the day on Wednesday, and they're getting involved in leadership opportunities there. So I would really encourage you to, one, encourage them to go to a happy hour. Like, next week, Live and Work in Maine is partnering with Propel in the third
Yep.
place. Yep. Right. For what's the name of that one? I'm going, but I don't remember what it's
Honestly,
called.
I don't know because that was pre
Um,
Ashley coming back to work.
Yeah.
But yes,
So they're around, and happy to connect out. Follow a lot of organizations on their social medias. So that's like after hour, but then how you can create it during hours, like I can think of one organization, Systems Engineering, which is based in Portland, but kind of statewide, where they get a lot of they encourage their employees to go volunteer and then report back. And I think that that's really a cool thing. And a lot of employers are doing that.
I just want to put a call out there. If anyone, we host welcome home events, and we used to do them more frequently all over the state. But if anyone has any interest in hosting a welcome home event, like an organization, our dream is to have those young professional networks or other networks across the state host them on a more regular basis. And we would send potentially like a kit where it has some Live Work Maine swag, and maybe we'll help cover some venue price or things like that. Just because when I don't know if we've mentioned, we live and work in Maine, we are a small team. So in order for us to really make a dent on these events, and these events are essentially made to, the thought process here was that retention piece. We wanted people to have an opportunity to have an event at like a brewery or a local park and have a food truck come, and it's so you can meet your neighbors. But we can't cover the county and Rangeley and Rockland and Portland on a regular enough basis to have these continue on. But anyhow, if anyone, it's something that it'd be interested in, like starting this up in your neck of the woods, you can always send me an email, and we'd love to try and find some of those folks that'll keep those going.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm going to up the age range here a minute. We do have one question in the chat about, okay, well, I'm in my 40s. not said quite this way. I'm in my 40s. What is there for me? How do I connect? What's yours? But so I can, so I can feel like I belong essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in my mid 40s, but I mean, my answer I think is a little bit different from Ashley and John's. I mean, one, I joined a church and that is in Portland, and that led to lots of connections because people at my church, they are in different spheres. Like some people are in education, some people are in politics. So I feel like I got connected that way. And then I feel like I also randomly, well, again, this may or may not apply, but like I was a young had young children, so I'm like, oh, let me look on social media for these like young mom groups. I went to a breastfeeding class, and then there were other people who are also in the same boat. And then Tree Street Youth, as we mentioned, like the third place, like Tree Street was another place that served our community. And so might not be a happy hour, I guess is what I was saying, which are cool. And if that's your thing, go ahead. But again, there are other places and ways you can build community. Um, so, I mean, those are some things that I did. And then again, I'll just go back to these communities of practice. When there are things like that, you are, for example, if you're a school leader and you don't feel like connecting with your teachers would be appropriate, like connecting with other school leaders and being in places where other school leaders are connecting. I think those are other ways, and just looking at maybe the different like community centers in your neighborhood. So, I mean, those are some of the things that I did. But again, might not be everybody's cup of tea.
And I would say, stepping out of my moderator role for just a moment, there are other programs like, for example, Leadership Portland, Leadership Bangor,
Mhm.
um, other ways to become engaged with people in your community, learning about your town, being connected to people who are living there. There's also statewide programs like Leadership Maine or ICL, and all of those opportunities, Institute for Civic Leadership, create an opportunity for you to connect and find your peeps, so to speak.
Mhm.
And that's one possibility as well.
I would, so we have a newsletter that something I'm trying to put on there is like maybe I highlighted run clubs. That's a big thing happening right now. Honestly, fitness like centers are a great place for people when they recently move somewhere to try and find that community. And but like run clubs are happening a lot. So and I bring up run clubs because there seems to be this momentum happening in Maine right now where people like yourself, they want to find community and they're starting up these clubs for people that they have similarities. And to Danielle's point, it might be like a mom group. It might be, and you put us this call out on social media, and I've seen a lot of traction happening with some of these. You just find I know someone who has a knitting group and they meet every Wednesday at the Eastern Prom, and they all bring they're called whips. It's your work in progress, and they do Whip Wednesday, and you all bring what the project you're working on. But Maine really has this like big pull happening right now for a community, and people are starting up their own stuff. And if there's anything, again, I'll put a call out there. Email me, message me if you have one of those groups because we love to highlight them. Because to Danielle's point, like I'm just kidding about the happy hour because you try and you meet people where they're at. It might be getting coffee in the mornings. And we're also working on having events that fit different like interests and schedules and things. So start something up. Maine is just, we're really craving more. So
Hmm.
I'd love to see more stuff happening.
Absolutely. And I think just along that point, right, you want to make sure that it's accessible for people, and you're not going to be able to get every single person at your organization there, right? Because some people can do it during work hours or some after or whatever, but if it's a happy hour, right, and it's really alcohol forward, be conscious of, you know, employees or community members that like maybe that they wouldn't want to go to a bar or they don't drink or it's against their religious beliefs to drink. So just be cognizant of like having a variety of different activities. Run club is great. Book club. You have like a breakfast club, earlier on in the day for people that arrive earlier. Or reaching out to other professional networks. I think that is the key point that there's just so many different groups in Maine. There's a lot of nonprofits in Maine. The Maine Association of Nonprofits has a website. You could look at that and see what's going on. But, I'm curious if the question is you're a leader and you're trying to get your community to like have like your employees are trying to have foster in a community,
Mm.
or you yourself are trying to go out to things. I think both are challenging, right? In a hybrid world where like most people aren't in the office anymore, it is kind of hard to foster a sense of community in an organization. I myself, we have 16 employees at Educate Maine, and I'm usually the only one in the office because I live nearby, right? And I can just walk there. So, how can you build community virtually? I do think that that's hard as well. But one simple thing that I've seen is there's a group of teachers who are all extended learning opportunity teachers, ELO teachers, right? And it's called Maine C3, and it's been going on for a while. And if you're an employer who wants to reach out to teachers, check out Main C3. But it's one of the best professional networks I'm a part of because we have a simple Google group, right? And anyone can just email that Google group. It's like a listserv, right? And we share all these different opportunities with each other. So just as like, how is your organization talking to each other? Can you set up a email Google group where like everyone can just put out things, right? And you can set a culture where, hey, I'm going to attend this book club. Like, does anyone want to go with me? Right. And bring a buddy. That's going to really foster a sense of community in this hybrid world where it is a challenge.
hmm And I was always talk about a book club. It feels like a good place for a plug. We actually have at Great Schools Partnership a virtual book club coming up called Diversifying the Educator Pipeline. So I think, again, that could be another opportunity. You can go by yourself and meet other people that are going to be in that book club. Or I've seen people also come with a team. And not only are they meeting other people, but they're also bonding as a team doing a book club that's virtual and fits people's, very busy schedule. So I'll just put a plug in for that as well.
Just if folks have been here for these 3 days, there was a speaker earlier, I think it was on Wednesday, talked about the movie Join or Die that's being shown probably around the nation and certainly within the state of Maine. But it does um, illustrate the transition we've made as a society toward gathering to being more isolated. And that has had a negative impact on this thing called othering. And so how do we return to some vestige of that? How do we return there? And these examples that people are sharing are a path forward to do that. Um, I think we've answered all these questions, but let me just double check. Um, so how do schools partner with local organizations to create community support? Is that something that's happening that schools are actively, as they think about retention, particularly, are they actively reaching out and connecting with community members to connect their employees?
I'd love to take this one.
Yeah, go for it.
The answer is yes, right? Like they are doing that. And then there's so many great stories out there of Maine communities reaching out to employers and vice versa. So if how, right? I think you just do it. You reach out, right? If you're an employer, make yourself available to a school. And there are so many ways, field trips, guest speaking. Every school I know has some sort of career or aspiration day. There's pre-apprenticeship opportunities. You can donate, obviously, and support programs. Get connected to Educate Maine as well. We are really connected to all these different schools. But you know, as a business, getting involved with your local schools is really key and standing up for educators. We're in a moment right now where education, certainly public education, is under attack. I mean, absolutely, right? So as an employer, like how are you making yourself known as a investor, as a contributor to your school area, right? Like, and not to be a cynical capitalist, but like all of those students and teachers, and they're going to see you standing up for them and standing up for their teachers. Like being silent in this moment where public school is under attack is also being seen, right? And if you're an employer who wants to get involved and get into the younger generation, if you're saying, "Oh, I have these open positions and no one's applying for them," maybe get involved with a local high school and donate to their band fund, or reach out to their career, teacher, or invite the biology students in to see some lab work that you do, or whatever. Make it content specific, but like get out in front of this, get into the classrooms, support the teachers. Just one last final plug. There's a really great initiative going on called Maine Loves Public Schools, and they have a YouTube channel right now, all in different counties all across the state, highlighting all of these really cool community business to school connections. And you can get an idea of how I'm talking to the employers in the room here, can reach out and support their educators, because we need your support right now.
Thank you, Jonathan. Now we are winding down to 2:30.
Sorry
Any,
about that.
any last comments, Danielle or Ashley, that you would like to share? No. Any questions from those of you who have been sitting here listening and thinking and pondering? Any last questions that you have? Don't see anything popping up in the chat. All right. Well, I want to thank you, Jonathan, Ashley, Danielle, for being with us this afternoon, and hopefully providing some opportunities for people to ponder and think about how they can get involved, what changes they might make in their own institutions or their lives, as we think about how to belong, how to support young leaders who we need in Maine, and we need them to stay, not just come but stay. So thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. I appreciate it.